Bret Stephens right now, columnist for the New York Times. Happy New Year, Bret. I haven't talked to you in 2021. Good to have you back.
Happy New Year to you.
I want to play one excerpt from President Biden's inaugural address yesterday, my favorite part of it, cut number one.
We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, or rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes.
So, Bret Stephens, that was my favorite aspirational part of an inaugural address. What was yours, and how do you rate the president's attempt to bring red and blue together?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what I liked about the address is how notably free of rancor or at least open partisanship was there. And what Biden seemed to be saying, if I put it in a word, is America, tone it down a little. And I think that was a pretty good message. I think for an inaugural address, good for the country. I'm going to try to do it in my own columns and writings and speeches. The country would benefit.
I actually made the same resolution vis-a-vis Twitter. I'm just not going to be drawn in to that, and I generally am pretty level-headed about it. But I think social media is an accelerant on division, Bret. And I know you left Twitter, right? You and Chuck Todd have left Twitter.
It's been good for it's very good for your soul. I mean, I've joked in the past, and not based on personal experience, that Twitter is essentially a version of cocaine, and that one starts doing it because it's popular, and then it makes you feel powerful. And the next thing you know, you're paranoid, and then in the end, you're out of a job and saying sorry to all the people you've hurt.
I did it because the Browns were 12-6, Bret, and people had to know. I mean, I like sports Twitter, but generally speaking, I've taken some calls this morning. They divide into two camps: those that believe the president's appeal will be well heard, and those who reject it out of hand because they've been treated so badly. How long will it take for the Republicans to follow Karl Rove's advice in the Journal this morning to look forward, not backwards?
Look, I hope they do it. I hope they do it very soon. And I think Republicans would be wise, to look for areas where they can actually move the ball forward with this new president. I think America desperately needs a successful presidency. We haven't had one in a very, very long time. There are areas where we could have some real forward momentum. I mean, the one that really strikes me off the top of my head is meaningful, substantive immigration reform. The president has extended an olive branch. Let's seize it. There are going to be inevitable partisan divisions and necessary partisan divisions down the road. I mean, America it's not a country that operates by consensus, and politics doesn't work well when it operates by consensus. But let's look for some opportunities to actually achieve a legislative success for a change.
Let's stay on that for a moment. I sent in an op-ed to the Washington Post yesterday. The column will appear, I think, today on immigration reform. I've been around this course twice, in 2006 and 2013. I know what the two non-negotiables are. On the right, there's got to be a wall, and it's got to be 700 or 900 miles long, and Trump has built 450 miles of it. On the left, there's got to be a path to citizenship. Those are non-negotiables for left and right. If we accept those non-negotiables, the details can follow. Do you see both sides accepting the other's non-negotiable, Bret?
Well, Biden had his executive order on the wall yesterday, but I have a sense. Look, I talk to a lot of Democrats, obviously, in the job I'm in, and the idea of a wall is actually not a total non-starter for a lot of middle-of-the-road Democrats for two reasons. One is a point of negotiation. It's worth it to them if it's building a wall, if there is a path to citizenship. And I think other people understand that there is, in fact, there is in fact an argument for a wall to deter some of the worst elements of human smuggling, human trafficking taking place on the southern border. So could it happen? Yeah, I think it could. I think it could happen. What matters a great deal is that the AOC squad wing of the party doesn't come to define its center, and I think that's going to be the whole question about the Biden administration, whether it's going to be captive to the progressive extreme or whether it's going to follow Biden's own very I think, center-left instincts.
And so when the president put down his immigration proposal, it said an 8-year path to citizenship and no wall. I asked Peter Baker, if that's an opening bid, it's fine. If that's a bottom line, it's done. Do you think it was an opening bid?
Well, yeah, I do think it's an opening bid. I mean, look, Joe Biden is nothing if not a legislator. That's where his career was formed for 36, 37 odd years of his life, if you don't include the vice presidency. So the idea that, we have for a change a president who understands that compromise and negotiation is the soul of politics. We haven't actually had. I guess Barack Obama was in the Senate for 4 years, but we haven't had a legislator for many, many years. You really have to go back to Jerry Ford to think of someone who has rich an experience in the Congress.
So let me turn to the second issue on which there is an immediate opportunity in front of the president. That is the impeachment trial. Now, I am of the opinion it's unconstitutional. I agreed with Judge Littig before he even wrote his piece, and I think it's obvious from the face of the document. Whether or not one agrees with me, the impact of dissolving that process would be extremely good on politics. What do you think the odds are of happening, and what do you think is the right thing to do?
So I disagree with you comprehensively, Hugh. I think what the president did, if anything is impeachable, it's what the president did on January 6th. And I think for the country's own moral health, he should be he was impeached. He ought to be convicted. The United States has to send an unequivocal message that kind of behavior on the part of a chief executive will never be tolerated, that the penalties will be severe, because otherwise you are sending a message to future chief executives, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, that kind of rabble rousing is permissible in a republic like ours. I absolutely think that Mitch McConnell was right, saying that the president stirred the mob. I think Liz Cheney was courageous in saying that that this is impeachable. I think the Republicans need to draw a clear line under the Trump years, and the sooner they exorcise the ghost of Donald Trump, the better it will be for the party. In fact, I think it's the only thing that will ultimately redeem the Republican Party. But you know where I stand on that.
No, I didn't, because to me, the key thing is not the impeachable conduct. It is now fact that it's impeachable conduct because that conduct was impeached by the House when the president was in office. Here's where I draw the line, Brett. I'm a constitutionalist. There are many newspapers I do not approve of that I wish we could shut down. I'm not talking about the New York Times. I'm talking about radical, crazy, left-wing Antifa newspapers. We can't shut them down because the Constitution forbids it. The plain reading of the Constitution, as Judge Littig pointed out, is that the president, vice president, and other officials can be impeached, removed from office, and banned from future office. And the conjunction of removed from office and banned is a conjunction. It's simply not constitutional, as closing newspapers is not constitutional. And we are a constitution-governed people. So we can't have a trial of him. In fact, the first issue is, I'll give you the last word, John Roberts wants nothing to do with it. It's not his job. So we're going to have Kamala Harris oversee this?
As far as I understand it, and I'm not Judge Ludick, but as far as I understand it, we can have a trial. We can ban him, and we ought to ban him. And Republicans would be well served to imagine if a Democratic president had engaged in that kind of conduct how would we be reacting? I would be
You
very
would-
surprised to imagine we'd be defending that president's
No, we're not defending. We're not defending the conduct.
interpretation of his rights.
It's not an interpretation. I urge you to go read it, Brett, and read Luttig. There are other scholars, by the way, who disagree with Luttig, but go and read it and have an open mind. It's terrible for the country, and it's a terrible precedent that opens up the future prosecution of any president by any dominant party. It's a terrible precedent.